All right. Hey, folks. Hey, Isaac. Hey, Steve.
Hey.
Hey, Ruby.
Cool. So welcome to Postman Student Community Stream. If you do not yet know about the student community here at Postman, we basically promote API literacy and education among students and educators through a few different programs, which you can find on our student program webpage. I'm going to flash that across the screen really quickly. Here's where you can find our Postman Student Program. But let me first start by introducing myself like we do on every episode here. My name is Ruby. I'm a technical enablement architect on the solutions engineering team at Postman. I'm collaborating with the student community team here to host some fun streams, and I'm here with my co-host, Isaac. Isaac, take it away. Let us know who you are.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Ruby. My name is Isaac, and I am a developer advocate on the student programs team here at Postman. And as Ruby said, we are coming to you live once again with a new stream and a new guest. Before we get to introduce him, I just also wanted to say the student community team is here hosting these streams for you. We know that all the students here, have questions about just what the programs are available at Postman and different opportunities that we offer, and of course, chances to be a part of the community. So that's what these streams are here as well for.
Cool. So, Steve, do you want to let us know where you're coming from? Why are you joining us on our stream today?
Hey, everyone. My name's Steve. I'm a software engineer at Handshake, and I also help run the FreeCodeCamp Dallas server, Discord server. And I'm excited to be here to talk about pair programming best practices and anything else that comes up today. So happy to be here.
Yeah, so I did just flash across the screen a quick welcome message to folks who are joining us. Let us know where you're joining us from. And I know Steve mentioned really quickly FreeCodeCamp Dallas. This is their Discord server if you're curious about finding that. So I'll leave that up for a little bit. But, why not get started? So Steve just mentioned that we're going to be talking about pair programming best practices. With regard to pair programming, what are some contexts? I'm asking Isaac and Steve here. What are some contexts where folks would be pair programming? I know hackathons is one. That comes to mind right away.
Right. Steve?
Yeah. I was going to say at Handshake, we use pair programming pretty often. Most recently, for myself, onboarding as a new developer at the company, one of the quickest ways to get up and off the ground is pair programming with someone who's familiar with the code base. So onboarding, definitely a good situation context to use pair programming.
Yeah, so what are some kinds of projects that you would find folks are working together on when, I know you're a software engineer, Steve, are there moments where you're finding yourself pair programming with somebody else? What kinds of projects are those?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of squads that make up different teams at our company. And oftentimes we'll have a feature that'll maybe overlap between different squads, different teams. So there's sort of, siloed knowledge or context that may not be available to one developer simply because they're not familiar with that part of the app or that particular service. So that's a good situation in which we would use pair programming to maybe help bring that developer up to speed or just kind of general knowledge transfer, knowledge sharing.
Yeah, so when you talk about knowledge sharing, that makes me think of documentation right away. Is documentation a space where you find folks are collaborating and working together?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. There's no one person that has all of the information about the app. It's really a collaborative group effort. And when it comes to documentation, it's very collaborative at Handshake, and it's definitely been super helpful, especially as a new developer at that company, to just kind of dig into the documentation. We use Confluence specifically at Handshake, and it's just great having that resource there. You can just search for whatever you need. Essentially, it's like a little company Google, and you can just find basically articles written by current and past developers about anything. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so you mentioned Confluence. That's, I think, an Atlassian organization or sub group that they have there. Mm-hmm. I love using Confluence. I feel like they just make everything easy to document. And making Confluence kind of like a space where you're able to find information about other projects or maybe linked Jira tickets. That's always been super helpful for me.
Yeah.
Isaac, have there been moments that you found where you're collaborating with somebody on documentation?
Yeah, great question, Ruby. Yeah, there were times where I had to uh, either at past jobs or at hackathons collaborate to draft a new documentation for a project, or even on GitHub projects or just even hackathon projects had to really document out and submit that. So I remember things that helped me out were just going back to the work that we did at one time with a teammate and just going over like, okay, like what was the plan behind this, the idea and technologies we used, and just really breaking it down to make it simple. So say there was a new member of the team, say either you or Steve were like the new member coming onto our team, and we don't know where, you might not know where to start. We just, the goal was, the idea is how do we make it so someone new to the team would feel like, look at the documentation and feel a little more comfortable, and make it easier to recognize what they're working on. So it was ideas like that, and just working with teammates and focusing on that helped writing down the documentation. But yeah, hackathons at past roles as software engineers, and even as an educator for some curriculums that I had to draft, I had to figure out, really with students, just like everyone in the audience. I know when you start off on your first day of class, like some of you may have already either this week or in the coming weeks, that syllabus is basically like documentation, right? It's telling you objectives, lessons, dates, exam days, and everything is subject to change sometimes. So that was something that I had to go to as an educator as well. Just it's like a living document that gets changed and very flexible. So exactly like Steve said, Google Docs.
For sure. Not having documentation can definitely be nerve-wracking, and especially like in that classroom setting, like you mentioned, Isaac. I know we did let folks know that we would be talking about do's and don'ts. What do you think is a definite do when it comes to documentation? And this is a question open to folks in the chat too. What is a definite do for documentation? So that's a space where we collaborate. I see some folks are joining us from Turkey. Looks like folks are here from Belgium.
Nice. International crowd right here. I have an answer for a definite do for docs.
Do for docs.
Well, I call them docs because documentation, but
Good alliteration there.
Thank you. Definitely a definite do for documentation is permissions. So it might seem like a very intuitive thing, but you want to make sure that whoever you're working, if you're on a team, for example, and even if you're just working solo, you want to keep those permissions open and manageable. So if you're the admin or you're the creator of the document, you want to be sure that you know how to change permissions and grant it to someone else, and just make sure that that's you're able to. Because say, for example, worst case scenario, you get locked out of your Gmail or your company email and you no longer have access to that doc, but someone else on your team might have it. So that's where permissions really comes in handy, where you can access things and say, worst case scenario, you get locked out, you can go back and change those permissions or get in through another person that has permission, the right to edit or make changes to the file.
Yeah, for sure. I know, to steal a phrase from Claire, in the biz, folks call that RBAC, right? Role-based access controls. Steve, did you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, for dues, I think it's so easy to, especially when you're writing documentation, the information is at the forefront of your mind. So it's real easy to just kind of do like a brain dump and just like throw all of the information into a document without really any formatting or any sort of organization. And I was just going to say for my do would be maybe once you get all the information on the page, try to organize it, put it in sort of a readable format so that when others have to access the document, they don't have to necessarily translate what you were thinking exactly, but they're able to sort of read, keywords and easily find what they need to find within your documentation.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about documentation, and I know some folks who are listening and are probably itching to see what Postman has in store for documentation, what we have available already. That's a little bit, part of our bread and butter in Postman. So let me quickly share my screen so we can take a look at what collaborating in documentation kind of looks like. So I'm over in the browser agent of my Postman instance here. You can also be on your desktop if you're trying to check this out or follow along. But basically, I'm just going to go to any one of my workspaces. I have one here. It's a team workspace. So that indicates that folks who are part of my team on my account, they're all able to access this, at least in a read-only capacity. This is kind of where, at least in Postman, role-based access controls come in. So this is really important, like we mentioned earlier. You don't want to be working on top of folks, and you only want the folks that should be editing things in your project or your work editing what they need to edit. Otherwise, you can grant read-only permissions to a whole group of people who probably need to see this but don't necessarily need to edit. So that's one place. But we did talk about documentation. If I were to go to, here's a fork of one collection that I have here. This is the Twitter API from our last episode. You can see on the right here that they have their documentation all set up. Some of this in Postman is auto-generated. So if you look under here, next in the collection, it'll let you know everything just based on, how you have things set up here. There's also, I know the Postman Student Program has some collections related to Student Expert that has some great documentation that's really helpful in the same vein as like a class syllabus, right? It helps you navigate things and make sure that you have the right API keys and endpoints being used. So if I go into collections here, here's a Student Expert one, and you'll see some documentation here as well, letting you know what requests are here. You're going to need some authorization. It'll be an API key. So this is all really helpful to see and set up as well. Are there examples of like great documentation, Steve or Isaac, that you have seen out in the wild?
Oh yeah, for sure. One set of docs that I always enjoy kind of perusing through have been the Stripe API docs.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the developers at Stripe work really hard to not only make their documentation easy to read and accessible for whatever level of programming you're comfortable with, but they're just aesthetically pleasing too. Like it's good, like well designed. Those docs I always enjoy going through.
Yeah, for sure. And I see Claire has also added the Spotify API docs are also a great example. I know Stripe always comes up as an excellent example of great docs, easy to read, aesthetically pleasing, like you mentioned. You just know where to look for things. And that's, as a developer, you kind of just want to get to your project right away without, going through too much meat, I guess, for lack of a better word. You kind of just want to know what you need for your project, plug and play, and just get going. So the easier that is, the better. I see someone agreeing with you here. Yeah, Stripe it has really good docs. They got those do's for docs. But speaking of do's for docs, what are the don'ts for docs? What are some things that if you saw it in documentation, you would go and cringe?
I'm trying not to take an example from personal experience here.
No throwing anyone under the bus.
I'd love to willingly throw myself under the bus. No, I was going to say before that question, well, there's the Postman documentation, of course. But if I would pick a favorite doc that I knew prior to my time at Postman, Hacktoberfest has some really awesome documentation because every year they change it and they update it, and it's a really great tutorial because it teaches people how to make their first pull request for students and for people who participants who maybe have never done a PR or a merge request on GitHub before. So check out Hacktoberfest in October. A really great like contest or just hacking event to check out. But going to answer your second question about don'ts and docs, I feel like a don't in doc would be, for one, I feel like a lot of people tend to forget that sometimes not adding comments or not adding descriptions or details is crucial. So, for example, I feel like we were talking about comments, or when making pushes to Git, for example, and then the descriptions and comments are one word changes. I feel like lack of details is like a good don't. If you can try to detail things out, as Steve said, sometimes dumping as much information is good, and then editing it and revising it from there, because then you can kind of trim and you'll keep the details. But yeah, lack of details I feel is an example of don't in a doc.
Yeah,
Explain
I
things.
think so. On like the other end of that spectrum, I definitely agree. Like not having enough detail is like, what's the point then if you're not giving enough information? But on the other end, it looks like Willie Geertz here just added one of the don'ts would be too much explanation, trying to explain to school kids. So I've definitely seen that where it's just like intimidating to see so much like a wall of text, for example. Um, exercise a separation of concerns where possible. So if you have something that like needs a bunch of details of its own, like it's its own section, link that out to its own separate space where possible. So definitely be a little bit more intentional and organized about the way you're putting your docs together so that you're not too much or too little, right? So it looks like Claire has asked the crew here, what are some other don'ts for docs? I heard Isaac mention earlier that there was some merging and pull requesting that he was doing, maybe with some colleagues or with teammates. That's another form of collaboration and something else that you would probably be doing if you're pair programming, right? What would be, so when I think about merging and pull requests, I think about version control right away. What do you think are best practices when it comes to version control? So do's for version control.
Having well detailed, like I said, when not writing changes is like the biggest thing for me. Like one word comments, or just like having more than one word in your pull request, or like anytime you push to the repo. Yeah, just more than changes is good.
Yeah, for sure. Steve, you look like you wanted to add something there.
This is kind of a joke, but not really a joke. But don't push force to master. So, but I will say, like seriously, it is good. A do for version control is to always push your changes on your dev branch. I've seen example situations where a dev will be working on something, for days, and they're like developing it locally, and for whatever reason their laptop dies or their device dies. So all that work that they had locally is it never got pushed up. So push your work often so that it gets, at least it's referenced somewhere.
So can you tell us more about don't get push dash force to master or to main?
Oh yeah, so that's just a little joke, like overriding master with your changes. But oftentimes, if you're rebasing on your dev branch, you'll often have to rebase and you'll have to force push just because you're simply rewriting the history. If you like to rebase instead of doing a merge commit, and there are different scenarios for that, but that's basically a little joke that me and some other developer friends will often joke about. Oh man, just like push straight to master. So
No way. Yeah, it's when you're working with a team, you want to make sure that you always have that like golden copy, like clean branch, like your main or
right,
your master, right?
right.
So always have those feature branches or your develop branch, for example. So we had someone here. Will he agree with you, Isaac? Versioning more than one word. Here.
Yeah, Willie. I definitely, yeah, Willie and I see eye to eye on that. I have a short story to follow up with what Steve said about not pushing to master. So a friend of mine told me a story of he was doing an internship for a company. I can't name it because I don't want to be under hot water, but he was an intern at this company. They were a media company, and he was on a team of other interns, and one of the interns pushed to master. And as a result of that, they lost all the work that they had done for that summer. Like, not just the intern, but the entire team that he was working on. So all the projects that they were building out. And the outcome of that was that they no longer have an internship program. So, which is unfortunate, but I guess this as a story to add allegory to, or add an anecdote to what Steve said. Just yeah, don't push
Yeah,
the
It's the
it's
best
for
way
sure.
to learn, though.
yeah.
Never
It's
do
a
it again.
cautionary tale. So I just flashed across the screen here a quick tiny URL to our student expert application in case you're curious about that. We'll talk more about that toward the end. But I do want to dive more into this version control conversation and collaborating, especially using Git. So something that I know we support in the Postman product and even on the free tier is integrations, right? So if you're using tools like GitHub, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, what's one that I'm missing? GitLab. Can't believe I missed that one. But if you're using tools like this to manage your repositories, you can always integrate that into Postman. That's another way that you can continue to be with your team in one space, in one platform, and have eyes on all of the tools that you're using. So Steve, I know you might have had some ideas on different tools that you use collaborating. Did you want to speak on that really quickly?
Yeah. I've got here on my screen just a couple of tabs open with just some tools that I've used in the past with coworkers and colleagues. Microsoft Live Share is a huge one. Most of the people I work with use VS Code, and this is an extension that you can download, and it essentially turns your code into like a Google Doc, and it's kind of neat. You'll see two cursors blinking in the screen, and you can both edit the document. I believe you can edit different files in different directories. And I think in the past, I've used it with a large group of people. I think we had maybe like 5 or 6 developers in a file, just like edit. It gets a little chaotic when you have that many developers, but it's a pretty neat tool, especially if one person may want to drive and the other person may want to sort of be the observer. So another tool is Tuple. This was developed, I think, originally using Ruby on Rails. I'm not sure if it still uses that, but it's pretty neat in that it gives you extra features so that you can control like maybe the window. And so if you're screen sharing, you can actually like type into that person's window, things like that. I think there's like screen highlighting, a bunch of things like that. CodePen is always a great place to collaborate. Maybe you have a quick idea, you just want to jot it down in CodePen. You can easily share that CodePen with other people.
I love
This
Code.
is Oh yeah, CodePen is great. I love it. And then in that same vein, Code Sandbox is also great if you need something a little bit more robust. Teammate, one of my good friends actually introduced me to this app, Teammate, and it's for sharing terminal sessions quickly and easily. Yeah. So I think this was, baby developer Steve. I was a junior developer, and I think I'd messed something up with my like Git commit or something. And something involving version control. I think it was a nasty, like gnarly rebase or something. And I was just completely stuck. And he's like, okay, well, here, use this link. And he was able to control my terminal using Teammate. So it was pretty neat.
That's nice. So he was able to remote control your terminal. I've never seen that. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. A little scary because you can see the stuff that they're typing, and it's like, oh man, I hope he doesn't like recursively remove like an important directory or something.
For sure. What
and
problem?
then
I'm curious.
Oh,
So in that scenario, what problem was the remote access able to solve?
I think it was the issue I ran. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was a couple years ago now. But I think it was, I was in the middle of a rebase and there was just like code conflicts. I didn't know which code I should keep and which code to override. So it was an interactive rebase, and he was just able to help me out with that and kind of we both collaborated and figured out, okay, yeah, we want to keep this. No, we want to override this. So we were able to do that using Teammate.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yep. And then the last one here is just Miro, which is just like a whiteboarding tool. It's a little bit more than whiteboarding. You can see in this example, you have like sticky notes. You can draw on it. You can actually add like a voting system. So we actually use Miro at Handshake. Our team uses it for sprint retros. So everyone can kind of add their input on the retro, and we can kind of vote on important issues and things like that. So I've actually never used Miro before I got to Handshake, so I'm pretty happy with it. So pretty neat little app.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I use Miro personally whenever I'm project planning, or way back when I was doing a little bit of a hackathon with one of my teammates from my coding bootcamp, and we used Miro like exclusively. Now that I'm here at Postman, another tool that's really helpful for us is Whimsical, which I think is similar, different features, but very helpful for collaborating. I love those like visual, just like make Post-its, put it on a board, ideate that way. Isaac, do you have experience with like visually organizing topics or anything that you're working on with your team?
Yeah, like for presentations, I would say, well, for one, love Miro and love Whimsical, just two shouting it out off the top of my head. Prior to that, great tools for visual organization. It goes down to just Google Docs and spreadsheets. Those are great tools for visually making something quick, and just I just like the shareability of it. And I know I mentioned permissions, but those are great too, just for getting it out there and sharing with everyone. Those tools work and they're free. That's the most important part. So if you're looking for something really affordable and you're on a student budget, you can't go wrong with Docs, Miro, or Whimsical.
There was a very funny comment earlier to push node modules, and I saw some agreement from the audience there. Do you all have experience where someone on your team pushed node modules and it just broke everything? Because I do.
I think I did that once, like early on, and like it was taking forever to upload my my repository to GitHub, and I could not figure out why. I was like, usually this is pretty quick, but it was because I had this giant node modules folder.
Yeah, and I may be recalling this incorrectly, but Steve, you might have input on this, but putting your node modules into like your .git ignore should be able to solve that, correct? At least in my experience, yeah.
Yeah, and I think somebody mentioned in the comments, EOL 2009 said the same thing, the git ignore.
Yeah, cool. So we had a lot of thoughts and advice on version control and Git. Something else that I wanted to ask folks was what repository management system folks in the audience are using, because I know we mentioned a couple of them. We mentioned GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, and Azure DevOps. Isaac and Steve, do you have a preference for what you often use?
I think, GitLab is what we used at my last company. So I used that for about 4 years. So I was pretty comfortable with that. And we use GitHub now at my new company, and it's pretty nice. I mean, they're very comparable. They have similar features. But yeah, I like either one of them.
Yeah. And I know we talked about this very quickly earlier. Isaac had mentioned this, to make sure that your Git commit messages are helpful and meaningful. They're not, super vague. They're also not really lengthy. So what is the worst Git commit message that you have ever seen? I'm curious. And that's a question to the audience as well. What's the worst Git commit message you've seen in the wild? For me, it's fixing something. Not sure what you're referring to. I believe you. I'm sure something's being fixed, but, what exactly is it linked to? Some kind of ticket, some Jira maybe that I can reference? It's just a little vague.
Change it.
Yeah. Here's one, Git commit message. That's another one. I've definitely seen that one, and that falls under don't. I would have to say. Here's a question. Do personal projects count? Git commit derp is my go-to commit message for my side projects when I fix a bug I add.
That's funny.
That is pretty funny. I have been guilty of doing that in my own personal projects as well. But if you're going to be hosting this stuff on some kind of management system like GitHub, and it's a public project or something that you're eventually going to share with somebody, I would urge you to, maybe be more thoughtful about the commit messages you're using. I usually just err on the side of being more meaningful with my commit messages.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I know some people go as far as to even use a specific tense whenever they write their commit messages. I don't know if I would go that far, but I think, just to reiterate what you had mentioned, yeah, just keeping a clear commit message, probably short and succinct. So
yeah, definitely. Let's aim to be more precise with what we're messaging. Isaac, do you have a definite don't that you've come across?
For version control or for commit messages?
For commit messages.
A definite don't. Definite don't would be writing the same message twice for two different commits. So let's say you change something and you commit it again and you made some minor changes, but you write the same message as the previous version edit or the previous version. That's a don't, because then you'll confuse the other people on your team. They might be like, wait, which one were you talking about? Were you talking about this? Even though they have different numbers, it's best to just distinguish it and say this is, X change, X, Y, and Z change number one, and X, Y, and Z change number two with the respective message. Writing duplicate messages just it confuses people.
I've definitely been in that position, probably more recently, actually. So when I'm pushing up, let's say, for example, a markdown file, I'm going to make all kinds of grammatical errors because that's just the kind of person I am. And so there'll be spaces and stuff that I forget that I need to remove. And I've already just committed something super meaningful. I'm like, I forgot this space. So I go in and I edit that. And I have this urge to commit just that one edit. And it's related to the previous commit. And so I have this inner struggle of should it be a similar message? But I mean, in those cases, I've just had to edit a minor space or grammatical error to be a little bit more specific. But I do understand and empathize in those situations where you're they're kind of related. Cool. So I know folks are often pair programming and collaborating nowadays online and not so much in person.
That was awesome. I feel like we should share the link that Steve just shared here.
Oh yeah. So it's just I guess some quick rules about Git commit messages. And really, I shared it less so it's not like, hey, you have to follow these rules in order to write a good commit message, but maybe as a starting point or launching point for teams, if they maybe want to pick and choose, hey, we should maybe use limit the subject to so many characters, or capitalize the first word in the message or something like that. So
that's
definitely not one size fits all.
Yeah, that's a great point. We did get a question related to something you shared earlier, Steve. What tense do you use in Git commit messages?
I'm not sure of the, and I apologize for any English majors out there. I'm not sure if this is the correct terminology, but I think it's present tense. Or actually, I think it might be in that link I just shared. Oh, it's the imperative mood. Use the imperative mood. So it's clean your room, close the door, take out the trash. Those are examples of it's not in the past, I cleaned my room, but it's rather clean your room. I don't know if that makes any sense.
So what would that sound like in maybe an example commit?
Yeah. So you could say, instead of removed line 32 from, function, you could just say remove line 32 from initializer or something like that.
I feel like I've always used past tense because I have just committed a change, right? So I would have said something like removed, but I guess some of that has to do with like your preference or even, your organization guidelines and expectations that you have on your dev team.
I think I used to use past tense as well. And then somebody probably like had me break that habit or something. I don't know. I think also when you look at like your Git log and it just shows all the commit messages, I guess it depends, like depending on how you interpret it, like whether those actions happened in the past or, you're kind of going through the logs thinking, okay, here's, this is exactly where they're removing whatever. So I guess it just depends.
For sure. So I know we sidetracked back to that conversation about commit messages, but what I was hoping to ask both of you, Isaac and Steve, was about your experiences pair programming and collaborating now in a remote setting. Is that any different from when you were in person? And what are some do's and don'ts that you've experienced in the remote setting now?
It's a great question.
That's a really good question. I feel like virtually versus in person, it's a bunch of little things. I mean, obviously, when you're in person, you're able to communicate a little bit more efficiently because of body language, things like that. Virtually, sometimes you can have your camera off, although I would suggest keeping your camera on if you're going to pair program. That's just my preference. I feel like also you're limited by using digital tools, like virtual tools, like the ones I showed examples of earlier. Whereas if it's in person, you could maybe just use like a whiteboard or a chalkboard. I don't know. Do people still use chalkboards? Or even a piece of paper and pen. However, the flip side to that is you could maybe have the opposite thought and like instead of being limited by those digital virtual tools, maybe those tools actually provide an experience that you wouldn't get if you were in person. So I guess it really just depends on how you look at it. But I would say that's probably the biggest difference between virtual and in-person pairing for me.
Yeah, speaking on that, experiences that you wouldn't get necessarily in person, I think a lot about my teammates who are like in IST time zone or even in Australia or on the West Coast because I'm over on the East Coast. I'm not able to get into the same room with folks sometimes, and it's a lot easier to jump on like a Miro board, async, and just let somebody know, I've made some changes, check it out on your own time, and we'll just continue collaborating that way. That way the conversation's not open and closed within a physical space. So that in some ways opens doors. So I do see that benefit. I think though that in my experience, collaborating in person has solved problems like a lot faster.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is that kind of drawback sometimes.
Yeah. For me, I agree with you. The both of you said it really well. Virtual is really convenient when we can't be in the same room, and in person just somehow it can feel, I guess it just feels a little bit more organic, and maybe the thought process and the problem solving just comes a little quicker and more naturally. But I feel like virtual working, doing pair programming remote or virtually still comes with its own benefits and trade-offs, just as maybe working in person can when, say, the computers go down and you have to go back to pen and paper or chalkboard or however. Uh, but yeah, I've experienced both, and I feel like both of them have their ups and downs.
For sure. I think adding to that, if I could share really quickly, something that a lot of platforms and Postman I know specifically do to address that kind of, not being in the same space drawback is allowing folks to make comments and collaborate live in that way. So if I were to, for example, go into an API that I have in one of my workspaces, something I could do is pick a version and go into comment mode and at someone, which would notify them. So I'll at Isaac here and say we could maybe change this name. and he would get notified via email or, depending on his notification settings in the app here, he'd be notified that this is something that I'm commenting on, and he'd be able to collaborate with me right away if he's an editor here as well. So that's one thing that I know Postman has done to solve this kind of not being in the same space issue. Have you seen some creative approaches in other tools?
I would say I think the one tool that does pair programming pretty interestingly well is there are a couple websites that are for practicing for interviews. Some of you students might be familiar with it. There's premp.com, there's interviewing.io for if you're trying to get ready for technical interviews. I like how both of them allow you to, well, with Premp, you can switch roles. So uh, say Ruby was interviewing me, then she would be the interviewer for the first part. She would present the problem, and I'd work through it in however amount of time that we agree on. And then when it's when it's Ruby's turn to interview, we can switch just with the click of a button. And then like everything is there in the UI. You'll see the problem that Ruby has to solve, and you'll see the prompt, and both of us work off the same terminal. So I like that switch method. That way you don't have to change tabs or go somewhere else. Replit is another tool I like for pair programming. It really works well. I really like that multiplayer feature. It's chaotic. It's really fun. Those are just tools off the top of my head. I don't know if you had any to add as well, Steve.
Not any specific tools off the top of my head, but just kind of, adding on to what Ruby was mentioning. I'm a huge advocate for anything that's asynchronous, simply because you can just look at it whenever you have time. And, like what it was mentioned earlier, not everybody's in the same time zone. Not everybody's even in the same country, like people can be from different parts of the world. So I think, as much as we can make things asynchronous as possible, when it comes to little, tiny notes like that, I think that's really great.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, there's like a million and one things I could say about collaboration in Postman, but I know I've seen in tools like Zoom emoji responses. That's something that, newer generation folks, that's just how we communicate.
Yeah.
So it's great that that's been implemented. And then you can do like reactions and stuff too live without interrupting. Because I know that was something early on for Zoom. It was a pain point for a lot of folks, is that, only one person could talk at a time, and other people would just get like muted when that would happen if you would just start talking over each other. So I think that was kind of resolved with like their reaction setting, right? So you could agree or like thumbs up or, celebrate without saying anything. Something that Claire here had brought up was that at her previous company, they would mob program. So folks would all get on a call together. One person would be driving the code or the coding, and other folks would be making suggestions and chiming in. I've definitely, during my coding bootcamp, worked on a project with a team, and that's what we did. We had one person driving the coding, and everybody else was contributing ideas or problem solving together. And I thought that was really helpful and still achievable. We had our technical hiccups here and there, but still achievable remotely.
That's a really like awesome way to practice pair programming. I like the name mob programming. I also wanted to add on to what you said, Ruby. As a newer generation person, I'm excited that I don't have to use words and I can just express emotions with emojis. I think that's the future.
Yeah, I think I saw something the other day. I think it was on Twitter. Like, I think Microsoft Docs, or not Microsoft Docs, Google Docs is creating like an official implementation for emojis. Like before, you'd have to do like a keyboard shortcut to add an emoji, or you'd like copy and paste it in. But I think there's going to be an actual integration now. At least I think that was a true tweet. You never know with Twitter.
Internet rumors. We'll find out. But yeah, we're coming up on our Kahoot gaming time now, actually. So if you are not familiar with Kahoot, it is an online web-based gaming platform. And I'll share my screen here. Actually, not my screen, Isaac's screen. where he has a Kahoot game set up for us. When you see the game pop up, there will be a code that you will enter at kahoot.it. That's the URL, right, Isaac? Kahoot.it? Just double checking. Oops, so that's the questions.
Yep.
Share the answers.
But yes, so you should be able to log into kahoot.it either on your phone. If you have a browser on your phone, you just go into kahoot.it and it'll ask for a code for the room that you're entering. You'll enter the code that you'll see here on the screen pretty soon. You could also join from your web browser. Just open up another tab and same situation, kahoot.it, enter the code. So I'll share this screen here.
So I'm going to set up the Kahoot room right now.
Okay. Cool. So we'll see that code pop up pretty soon.
Okay.
Nice. It looks like Claire has shared the link to join. So I'm going to find that in my Safari here because I want to see how folks compare to my answers. I did not get a heads up about these questions at all, so we'll see. Cool. Were you ready for that pin, Isaac?
Yep, getting it ready now. Start. Okay. Is it classic mode or team mode? Classic?
Classic, yep.
Okay, the pin is
loading. There we go.
40318.
540318. Cool.
Feel free to choose the I'm not sure if they're allowing you to pick animal nicknames. In the last Kahoot game we had, you could pick an animal nickname, but
Oh, that's neat.
yeah, was that something you did? You added as part of the game, maybe, or did the game just do that by itself?
No, I added that just to err on the side of safety. You never know. So, but yeah, we can choose our own nicknames here.
Gotcha.
I want that soundtrack.
I want that animal nickname. That's very creative. Someone has a sense of humor. Okay, cool. I'll keep this open for another minute or two to let people jump in, and then get started. Come and join our Kahoot game, everybody. It gets pretty intense. Last game we had 2 people neck and neck competing for first place, so I'm excited to see how this goes as well.
It's a cash prize, right? $1 million cash prize.
Yeah, Monopoly money.
Oh yeah.
You can brag to all your friends. All right, 1 more minute to join the Kahoot game. 1 more minute.
Cool. So, looks like someone literally put animal nickname.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay, is this in case let's see. I'll just check the chat to see if anyone is asking for the code. All right, then we're good. All right, let's get started. Oh, wait, I realized this is the wrong quiz.
Oh my goodness.
The game
It happens.
I taught. All right,
You never know.
It's a good test run.
Yeah, I'm going to change it to the other quiz. So I had multiple Kahoots before. Let me just fix that right now.
So Isaac is a Kahoot whiz, and he plays Kahoot all day, every day, and that's why he's getting his Kahoots all mixed up. But yeah, I would have definitely destroyed that design challenge. Just saying. Well, animal nickname. Hopefully you are able to join our new room.
Sorry, guys. I'm kind of trying to get back to the home page to change it.
Yeah, no worries. So we had a question, Steve, while we're waiting from Willie here. What about lead programmer and project leads? Not all communication can be async, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, of course, some communication I feel like can be asynchronous, especially if it's not pressing. If production is down, you don't want to communicate that asynchronously. That's kind of a all hands on deck, type issue. I also believe there's benefits to not having async communication, specifically if you're in a situation where there's back and forth that can happen, question and answer type stuff. So, yeah, I would say not every situation needs to be async. It's just nice to have those async moments.
I find that usually when you need someone's input, advice, or opinion on something, it's okay to have that happen asynchronously. But like you mentioned, if there's a bug or something that's bringing a whole system down, a hot fix is necessary, everyone should be present for that, or every stakeholder should be present for that.
Sure.
Here's a hot tip. There's a new chance to use animal nicknames when you join the new room.
Yeah. Get your nicknames ready.
Who was it that won that first one? I'm forgetting now. It was like Quack, Dr. Quack. I feel like I change it every episode. I have no idea who it was.
Nice.
So, Steve, have you played Kahoot games before?
I did, yeah. Actually, in a past life, before I was a software engineer, I was a teacher, and we use Kahoots all the time, just as a fun game with the kids.
Nice. So you know that it can get pretty competitive.
Oh yeah.
I know there's like a leaderboard that's part of Kahoot. So after every question's answered, you can see like how you're faring compared to everyone else. Last stream, we had someone named Emily, I believe, who was the top of our leaderboard. It was her first time playing with us too, so she had huge bragging rights.
Nice. That must be a new feature, this universal leaderboard. I don't remember that before.
Cool. So Isaac, are you able to pull up the Kahoot game? It's fine if you're not. We can also move on to our shout outs.
Okay. So I made a Kahoot, and for some reason the Kahoot that I saved is not popping up. So I guess we can do the, if it's fine, we can do the Kahoot that I made for my other class, which is just general video game trivia, or we can move on to shout outs.
How long is your Kahoot game?
It's only
how many questions?
Like 8 to 10 questions, just about.
Okay, because we have about 8 minutes, so I want to make sure we do give a chance to shout out our student community members. I know I know lots of folks jumped into the previous Kahoot, so make sure that you are present with us on the next stream. We'll definitely make sure that we have a longer, funner Kahoot for that one. No one likes a longer commute anywhere.
No.
But yeah, we'll have a Kahoot for you all on our next stream, which we have bi-weekly. So no worries on that front. Thank you for jumping in anyway into the one that we hopefully had prepared for this one. But jumping into our shout outs and kind of closing things up for this episode, we had so much fun talking about pair programming and collaboration, do's and don'ts, best practices, and so on with our buddy Steve here, who represents FreeCodeCamp and Handshake. And we got a lot of insights from folks in the audience as well. So thank you so much for participating. We're going to end with some highlights and shout outs for some extraordinary student community members. So recently we have seen Amit Tiwari and Himika contribute some really cool things in our Discord community. So Amit specifically made and shared some really cool YouTube videos. One of them was called Cracking Off-Campus Placement. So as folks are starting to start their new school year, that's going to be something that's really helpful that you can check out in our Discord community, which I'll flash across the screen pretty soon. And then Himika, also in our Discord community, wrote a blog about avoiding burnout. I feel like, unfortunately, that's a little bit of a timeless topic, but always good to hear different perspectives and learn about folks and their experiences with trying to avoid that in the workplace and avoid that, especially just breaking into tech for the first time. So let me just super quickly flash our Discord community link here. This is a space where the Postman Student Program and community comes together. We talk about fun things like hackathons coming up. We share memes with each other. Folks highlight and show off the projects that they're working on, and you never know where, how far those projects can reach. Sometimes they'll make it to the stream. Other times they make it to the Postman blog. You never know. So it's a great community to be part of. We love highlighting and emphasizing folks who join that community. So wrapping things up here, for those who are considering checking out our Student Expert program to earn free certification and a badge, signifying that you're a Postman expert, don't forget to use the following codes in your Student Expert application. So let me just super quickly flash that across the screen. So here's the application link. It's just a tinyurl.com/postman-student-expert. That's where you'll find the Student Expert application. And once you are in there, I had removed the codes, but once you're in there, you'll see a drop-down or a list of sources, and you can select a live stream for that. Cool. My esteemed guest here, Steve, do you have any shout outs or any thoughts that you want to close out on?
Just a quick shout out. One of our other server maintainers or server admins through the specific FCC Dallas link in the chat. So check that out if you're in the Dallas area, in and around the Dallas area, or not. We have members from all over the country. So it just says Dallas. We won't kick you out.
Okay, cool. So I see it here. It's fcc-dallas.com.
Yes.
Cool. And I know, Steve, you had shared earlier a Discord link for FreeCodeCamp. So I'll flash that across the screen here as well for folks who are interested.
Can Austin come to the party too, Steve?
Oh, yeah. Come say hi.
Awesome. What was that, Isaac?
Isn't it howdy?
Is it howdy?
Howdy.
Oh,
yeah.
howdy. Yeah. That's kind of like when my wife first came down to Texas, she was like, where are all the horses and all the cowboy hats? And
oh my.
like, well, that's only part of Texas.
All right. Well, with that, let's close out our session today. It was so awesome having you with us here today, Steve, sharing your input and your perspective. Isaac, as always, best co-host. Yeah, we'll close out and I'll end with our goodbye graphic here. So see y'all. See you on the next stream in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.